Hi, I'm Lou Mycroft and I've been working in a thinking environment for nearly 25 years. So my challenge here is to get 25 years of my own learning into about 15 minutes. Wish me luck. So the thinking environment is a set of processes that are about getting people to think better and to think better together. Why do we need the thinking environment in education? Well, why do we need it in the world? Why do we need it in families? Things are not going so well, and it's a way of enabling people to communicate much better together. What thinking environment applications do is that they slow things down so you can get more done. They make learning really matter, really count. They calm down learning spaces, meetings, workplace environments, help you make better decisions. All of that because what happens is that you learn to think better. Over the years, because of the thinking environment, I've been in effective, creative, mutually respectful teams where we can challenge and communicate really well with one another. I've raised a really fine young man in a thinking environment. And in class, students have been able to absolutely give the best of themselves and achieve brilliantly. So it's not rocket science. What the thinking environment is are a number of ways of working based on 10 components of a thinking environment. And if you see the words here, you'll see that they're big words, familiar words. And the idea is that when a group of people or an individual is in a thinking environment, all of these components are in place. And that's the job of the facilitator, whether they are teacher, coach, facilitator of a meeting. Their job is to hold these 10 components so that the thinking environment can be present and everyone can do their best thinking. It's an intentional practice, but it's not a tick box one. It's really about creating the best conditions for people to be able to think. So when all 10 components are in place, it's a thinking environment. You're either in a thinking environment or you're not. Even if you're not, to have some of these components in place will help you think better. But the idea of being in a thinking environment is that everybody's aware of it. There are a set of rules that everyone adheres to, and the best thinking happens. So that's lots about the what and a little bit about the why. Now for the how. Long before we had apps on the phone, Nancy Klein, the Thinking Environment founder, talked about applications, different ways of applying those 10 components to a situation. Here you can see just some of the applications of a thinking environment, from a full coaching process to a thinking round that enables everyone to be present in the room. Thinking pairs are one of the most difficult but at the same time simplest applications of a thinking environment. Difficult because they're countercultural. In a thinking pair, each person has the same amount of time, say 3 minutes, to do their best thinking. They're asked a question as simple sometimes as what do you want to think about, and then the person listening to them just shuts up and gives them the best possible attention to generate thinking. The first time anyone does this, they really squirm. It's not a natural way of communicating to know that you're not going to be interrupted, to sit there possibly in silence when your initial thoughts have dried up. But what happens is you squirm your way through the silence is that you reach that deeper thinking, the thinking you wouldn't have got to if someone had jumped in with their own thoughts. Thinking pairs and the thinking rounds where everyone has a turn to speak and is compelled to speak even if they only say pass. These are the building blocks of other thinking environment processes which are more sophisticated, I guess, more complex, but never difficult. Just the same set of rules applied in different situations. There's a coaching process which operates within a questioning framework that uses the thinker's own words. Similarly, a process for mentoring. Time talk, which is conflict resolution between two people. Dialogue, which enables a couple of people to think really well about a topic they're both interested in. It's possible to use the thinking environment really effectively in teaching, in guidance, in personal tutorials. I've been doing this for 25 years and it really makes a difference to everyone's experience of education. Nancy Klein is the woman who first observed the way that the brain made breakthroughs, and this was the foundation for her of the thinking environment. What's interesting is that now we can see to some extent inside the brain through neuroscience. We're learning that Nancy was right about so many things. As she says, the quality of everything we do depends on the quality of the thinking we do first. Over 20 odd years, I've got hundreds of stories I could tell you about the thinking environment. I've worked in communities with huge groups, small groups of people. I've worked with elected members who I sometimes tongue-in-cheek refer to as my hard-to-reach group. I've worked with senior leaders. I've worked with classes of students from first touch lifelong learning to degree programs. I've used the thinking environment as a parent and in parenting classes, with young people, with intergenerational work, with offenders, with staff teams, with whole organisations. I've never seen it not work, though I've seen it resisted by people who have all the power in the first place and don't want to give any airspace up to anyone else. The story I'm going to tell you is about Rowetta, with whom I worked not so long ago. Rowetta and her student colleagues had been studying together for 3 years on a degree programme. When I walked into the classroom for the last 10 weeks of their course, what I noticed was that all the brown faces sat on one side of the room and all the white faces on another, and that one person, the only man in the room, had 90% of the airtime. What's more, this wasn't a thinking group. It's quite a passive group of students, people who just wanted to be told the answers, really fed up with their university experience, quite bitter in some cases, just wanted to get it done now, just wanted to pass. And for some people, they'd even lost the appetite for doing well. Patiently, with a lot of resistance, I introduced thinking rounds and thinking pairs. Nothing cleverer than that, just basic thinking environment groundwork. I worked with Rowetta and her colleagues for 10 weeks, 2 hours a week. By week 5 or 6, the thinking environment was starting to really make a difference. The person who'd had all the airtime was really just talking to fill the silence. He got chance to learn about himself as a thinker. Those who never spoke because the only power they had was to take their voices away began to contribute to the conversation. And because of the questions I asked, people started digging deep. We'd start every session with a round where the question was, what have you read, seen or heard in the last week? And what question has it raised for you? Yes, you can pass, but if you pass forever, you start to stand out, and not in a good way. This turned round the culture of the learning group. People who drifted off started to come back to it, and the appetite for learning was regained. In every conventional success, retention, success rates, degree classifications, in every conventional way, the thinking environment transformed this learning experience. But in even more important ways, it was significant too. This is what Rowetta said at the end of that 10 weeks. I'll give you a moment to read it for yourself. This is the first time I ever felt fully accepted as a black woman since I came to the UK 30 years ago. She was not the only person in that learning group to talk about the sense of belonging created by the thinking environment. I could go on forever, but I promise I won't. One of the challenging things about teaching the thinking environment, particularly when I can't be there myself, is that it's impossible to imagine what it feels like to be truly listened to until you actually experience being in a thinking environment and knowing that you're not going to be interrupted. As experienced educators, we all think we've done stuff like this. Oh yeah, it's circle time, are they going to pass a talking stick? You know, all of this stuff. And similar processes are often used in ways which are quite infantilizing. This is not. This uses the power of silence and the power of the 10 components to give it back to you. What do you think? I hope that following these slides you will get the chance to begin to experience the countercultural, the quietly radical, the transformational nature of the thinking environment. I really hope you'll give it a go.